3 Letters from Egypt. January 1st, 1897. Letter 1. Dear Philippa, our journey to Egypt has been a success. I write to you now from Alexandria. We traveled here from London via trains and steamships, and I realize I have not written to you once. I apologize. But sitting here in the warm morning sun on the first of the year, I finally have a moment to write to you in detail. Peter and I departed from London on December 26th. Even though we headed to Egypt for archaeological purposes, we chose to use the Paul Lawrence and Sons travel agency to book our travel. Using the agency kept the travel plans simple for us, and this helped ease our minds since we had so many details to work out for the dig. Paul Lawrence and Sons have established routes and favorite hotels. But you know us. We did steer off their path once or twice. One must leave room for adventure. We boarded the train in London, each with a small case for necessities. We traveled light, sending our surveying tools, brushes, and chisels in a trunk by cargo ship. I took a small notebook and pencil aside for journaling and sketches, and I'm relying upon both my journal and my memory to describe our trip to you. Our first destination was the seaside town of Brighton, where we would change trains and then cross the chain pier to Dieppe. The train to Brighton was peaceful, a light rain pitter-patting against the windows. I admit I may have dozed off listening to it rhythmically tapping the roof and glass. When the train slowed, I woke up and gathered my travel case, and we stepped out onto the rain-soaked platform. Peter slipped his grey woolen coat around my shoulders to protect me against the cold and wet. I felt the silk lining against my skin and the small tear at the hem where thread had escaped. The train platform looked out of the ocean. Lightning coursed through the sky, breaking through the dark and illuminating the pier and empty beaches. The waves curled into whitecaps and beat their way to the rocky shore. Despite the intensity of the scene, it reminded me of an oil painting one might hang in a gallery. I painted it with blues and greys and purples in my mind, and framed it in an ornate gold frame. Though my talent lies in sketching lifelike objects and artifacts, I resolved to sketch the scene and attempt to paint it some day. The platform, we were informed that no more trains were crossing to Dieppe that evening, as they were not certain whether the chain pier had suffered any damage. A concierge from a nearby hotel invited us to dine and stay for the evening, so we carefully picked our way to the hotel, where we ate a hot, delicious meal before slipping off to sleep in a luxurious hotel bed. I remember the silk sheet and down comforter well, since it was one of the few nights I slept in a proper bed. The following morning, we ate the continental breakfast. We checked out of the hotel and made our way to the train platform. The rain had stopped by then, but the heel of my boots sunk into the mud as I walked. Peter offered to call a carriage, but I loved the squelching sound. We made it across the street, and just as I reached the train platform step, a carriage drove by. The wheels splattered mud, and I leaped forward out of the way. Unfortunately, I fell into Peter, and we both found ourselves sitting in mud. We looked a sight, but no one said adventures were tidy. We laughed and made our way to the platform. dragging mud across the wooden floor. Peter inquired with the trainmaster about tickets. The man eyed us and smiled sympathetically. He informed us that the train pier had been damaged in the storm and no trains would be able to cross for many days. He advised that we try the docks, since many local fishermen and boys will shuttle travelers in exchange for payment. We thanked the man and walked to the docks, determined to forge ahead to Dia that day. Other travelers also waited at the docks, and several boats were offering their services. A young local gentleman who regularly made the journey between Brighton and Dieppe made space on his boat for us, and we climbed aboard. At one time, the boat had been white, but years of use had chipped away at the smooth surface, and the underlying wood picked out. The waves had calmed since previous evening, and our crossing was smooth. The oars glided in and out of the deep blue water, and I found myself thankful for the tranquil, open-air crossing instead of the train. Arriving in Dieppe, Peter paid the gentleman for his services, and we trekked to a cafe. While I enjoyed our boating experience, I relished the idea of hot tea for my chill bones. I stared dreamily around the cafe. It was sturdy wooden building with large front windows with a full view of the town. Marble top tables and cane chairs lined the walls, each table only providing enough seating for three. I took out my sketch pad, intending to sketch the scene, but there was too much to take in. Out of the window, I spied rolling hills and green pastures. I watched the farmhand herding brown spotted cows to graze, and I heard a few distant moos. Peter broke my reverie when he delivered cups of Earl Grey to the table. Our train for Paris would leave in 2 hours, and we settled in for a moment of rest. I asked Peter if he knew anything about the area, and he mentioned that Vikings used to come here. He told me that there was an active dig somewhere between Dieppe and Paris. My heart leaped at the thought. I wondered out loud whether we would be able to see the dig from the train. A dinner at a nearby table spoke up. She was a kind-looking older woman with graying hair at her temples, topped by a jaunty cap. She told us that we would not be able to see the dig from the train, but if we rented a motor car, we could drive by it. I clapped my hands and looked to Peter. His eyes sparkled back. We inquired where we could rent a vehicle, and she pointed the way. Within a quarter of an hour, we found ourselves sitting behind the wheel of a motor car and staring at the open road. Peter began driving, but once we had cleared the town, he pulled aside of the road and parked. When I looked about for the dig, I only saw sheep. I remember turning to look at him quizzically when he winked and got out of the car. Moments later, he had climbed into the passenger seat and showed me to drive. I had never driven before, but I am not one to back down from a challenge. I laughed and climbed intrepidly into the driver's seat, the black leather squeaking beneath me. The shiny red car was very new, and I nervously gripped the steering wheel with my bare hands. I examined each gear and gauged that I could see, rubbing away the dust that had gathered during our trek so far. My feet reached forward for the pedals, and I practiced braking and speeding. I glanced at Peter to make certain he was serious. He leaned back in his seat, confidently and said, "Take us away." Philippa, I'd like to write that I drove perfectly farthing. I'm afraid that'd be a lie. It took several false starts before we were whistling along the road to Paris, but I did it. I kept my eyes firmly open the path in order to avoid potholes in the road. I concentrated so hard, in fact, that I was quite startled when Peter said, "Hello, there it is!" I had half forgotten why we took the road, and I looked up expecting to see Paris. Instead, I saw the encampment for the dig in a field close by. The workers created a small central tunnel that branched out in various directions like a spider's web. Tools and shovels had been abandoned throughout the site. I hate to speak ill of a colleague, but whoever was leading this dig seemed very disorganized. I resolved that our dig in Egypt would never be in such disrepair. I found myself more grateful for Peter's background in surveying. He knew the precautions that needed to be taken when digging for artifacts. This dig appeared to have closed down for the day, so we parked the car and walked over. The grass chipped away at the dried mud on my skirt as we passed through the field. A table built from driftwood stood near a canvas tent. On the table were small wooden tiles, the size of a coin. Each tile had writing on it, and we studied them, concluding that they were Viking runes. While we had both focused on Egyptology at university, we still have profound respect for all historical research. I found myself wishing that I could work both in Egypt and in France, and I was sorely tempted to steal one of the runes for private study. But I forced myself to commit them to memory and draw the angular shape into my sketchpad. The sun began to set on the distant horizon, its orange and pink rays piercing the sky. As we were unfamiliar with the road to Paris, we worried about getting in too late. We hurried back to the car, and Peter took over driving. The road plowed by us as we chugged along for another hour. We enjoyed the drive in quiet as I contemplated the leaves that had carved their mark into the world around us. I wondered how the countryside had changed over the hundreds of years as it was settled and developed by its inhabitants. Tracing these thoughts around in my brain kept me occupied until we arrived in Paris. We were both very hungry when we arrived, since we did not have a proper lunch. Thankfully, our Paul Lawrence and Sons coupon made finding lodging at a stately hotel a breeze. The hotel had a small restaurant still open, and we were seated quickly. Despite the growing popularity of the electric light bulb, this restaurant did not have even one. Instead, candles glowed on the tabletops. Thick purple velvet drapes hung from the ceiling and pulled onto the floor. The gold fringe that lined the curtain's edges danced lightly in the slight evening wind and added to the romantic atmosphere. The restaurant served a heavenly duck with cranberry dressing, cream corn, and fresh snap peas for the main course. I was so hungry that I had to remind myself that I was in polite society and could not eat it all in one bite. But I slowed down enough to savor the cuisine, and I thought of you especially during the dessert portion. They serve a rich chocolate mousse that I'm certain you'd love. Once I returned home, you and I We'll have to make a special trip to Paris so you may taste this mousse and judge for yourself. Once we retired to our room, I scrubbed at any remaining mud on my traveling skirt. The wool was ideal for the cool autumn days, so I hoped to refresh it and allow it to dry overnight. I had packed my travel bag with only one other dress, but it was a lighter gown of cream cotton. I had planned to wear it once we had made our way to the warmer southern climate. The following morning, I was relieved to find my dress had dried, and I dressed it in once again. My traveling cap was slightly dusty from our driving adventure, so I opened the window and shook it out. The city was just waking up, and the morning sun seemed hesitant to make her appearance. A thick fog still hid her from view. It was a perfect start to a lazy travel day. Our train was slated to depart at 9 o'clock, and we were comfortably arranged in our compartment by 8:30. I stowed my traveling case overhead and secured it with straps. 2 benches lined either side of the car, padded and upholstered in velvet. The seats were navy, but the seating closest to the window was warm and revealed the grey textile beneath. Despite the wear on the bench, the rest of the compartment appeared in good repair. The mahogany walls shined and reflected the electric chandelier. The train left the station with a familiar rush, and I settled into the window seat. I wiped at the condensation that had gathered so I might stare out the window. As we navigate out of the station, my first view was of other trains pulling in or resting like great stallions ready to gallop above the countryside. The steam blowing from their tops looked like their breath, and the clatter of the wheels like the clip-clop of horses' hoofs. I looked forward to staring out of the window at the towns and cities as we flew by, but I had the foreboding feeling that rain might hamper my view. Alas, I was correct. Within the first half hour of our trip, the clouds above opened up and began to pour. The rain batters against our window with fervor, and the wind whistled through the whole way. We were quite safe, but a bit chilled. A porter came by with comforters, and we gladly took 2. I took off my shoes and curled beneath it. The blanket provided was a block from the wind and warmed me to my toes. Despite my lack of view, I pulled out my sketch pad and set to work. I pictured the evening in Brighton once again and outlined the waves rolling up onto the sand shore. I admit that I lost myself in my drawing for several hours. Peter later mentioned that he had tried to speak to me, but it was like I could not hear. I was so engrossed. You know how I can be. There's something about a pencil between my fingers and blank page in front of me that commands my rapt attention. It feels pulse of possibility, and it asks me to shape it into something new. It rained the entire way until we reached Naples, where we met our steamship to Alexandria. I had occasionally stood up on the train to stretch and work out my sore muscles, and my legs had adjusted to the rhythm of the train. Leaving it, walking to the port, and climbing aboard the steamer proved a test of my balance. My legs hardly knew where to go. After our quiet train ride, the steamship's large open deck was a welcome sight. Loungers were spaced evenly upon the beach planks, and large umbrellas provide shade. We were now far enough south that the afternoon sun could beat against the skin. I traded my old traveling dress for my lighter cotton gown and thanked my past self for this forethought. My excitement to arrive in Alexandria mounted while we were aboard. I spent most of my time on the observation deck, hoping to spy our distant destination. The air smelled salty, and the wind occasionally sprayed drops of sea water upon my face. I attempted to tightly tie my hair up every morning, but to no avail. My hair would break free. Small brown wisps would float about my face, and rest my hair would hang loosely about my shoulders by the evening. After dinner, Peter and I would retire to our cabin and spread out the rolled maps for our dig. We had been sent maps to scale by a local, and we worked on dividing each location into 1 meter squares. I measured and drew the lines upon the yellow map while Peter named each section. We would be in charge of several locations, and we are uncertain how many workers we would have. We hoped to be as prepared as we could be before driving. Our last day on the ship, however, I did not return to our loom in the evening. We were supposed to arrive in Alexandria the following morning, but a rumor spread on the ship that we might arrive early. I could not tear myself away from the observation deck, hoping the rumor was true. My efforts were not in vain. At 4 o'clock, I thought I spied a dot on the horizon, and by 7 o'clock, land was in full view. We had arrived at last. And my dearest Philippa, I must rest my pen and focus on the days in front of me instead of behind. I will write to you again and share with you the goings on of our dig here in Egypt. Please share my note with mother and father, and be certain to take care of my little kitty, Sphinx. I look forward to your reply filled with details about trips to London, the harvest, and your studies. With love and warmth, your dearest sister, Hilda.